and unwise. I've been told that I'm very honest, which is a good thing, but I think they just mean that I say whatever I'm thinking. So that is something that I'm trying to work on. The Proverbs has been very good about, teaching me to hold my tongue and, think before you speak, and things like that. So this Proverbs has definitely been good for me. It's been working through my life. And I've learned, the magnitude and the power behind, the words that you can say. It can be for the good. It can be for the bad. It can get you in trouble. It can hinder yourself from gaining wisdom. But with your words, you can also praise God, uplift your brethren, spread the truth, and demonstrate wisdom. And so wisdom is something we definitely all should be praying for. Knowledge is what enables you to answer a question correctly, but wisdom empowers you to act and react properly to those various circumstances that we go through in life. I said that I'm going to embrace my inner Tyler. I thought that he did a really good job doing this study. The lesson flowed really well. People tended to make a lot of comments, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm going to try to embrace that as well. And I hope that I get a lot of discussion tonight. I'm not one of the people that want to hurry through this lesson. I'm more worried I don't have enough, so I'd rather not get to the end and be done, or not get done before the end than not get through all my notes, so please make comments. So the lesson, the title of the lesson is Behavior Management, Demonstrating Wisdom, and it's lesson 13 on page 51. So this goes over Proverbs chapters 25 and 26. This was written centuries ago, but it's still relevant today, and we can apply it to our lives to make better decisions. So chapter 25, it begins kind of talking about governing officials and how we are supposed to handle ourselves with and around them. And it makes it pretty clear from the beginning, kings are not gods. Matthew 23, verse 9, it says we should call no one but God Father. So not our presidents, not our governors, not the mayors. They tend to think that they have more control and more power than they do. They may think of themselves as gods, and people fall for it. I mean, there's lots of people, and even probably some Christians, who will not agree with something, but then once it's passed or legalized, then they think that that's okay. Just because something is legalized does not make it right in the sight of God. It doesn't matter what the drinking age is, because I'm not going to drink alcohol. It doesn't matter if abortion is legal or not. I'm not going to have an abortion. So it doesn't matter what the laws are. We are going to be Christians. We're going to follow God's word. It doesn't matter what they say is okay. Because God tells them, He says it's not their job to choose what is right or wrong. It's their job to search God's word and figure out what is true and righteous, what God has said is true and righteous. So if you would, please turn with me to Proverbs 25, and we'll start out in verse 4. But before we begin, does anyone have any comments? All right. Could someone please read verses 4 through 5?
Take away the dross from silver, and it will go to the silversmith for jewelry. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness.
Thank you. So we have to take away the wicked. That's how a righteous government is going to be established. We've heard the saying, one bad apple spoils, the bunch or the rest of the apples. However, that our officials have not figured that out yet. We see time and time again, people who are in charge, people who have lots of power, lots of respect, rubbing elbows with a lot of really bad people. I, for some reason, think of like Jeffrey Epstein. He had ties with a lot of important people, and it's scary to think of that. That people who are in control, they have a lot of power, are hanging out with, horrible people like that. It's really scary. So there's a lot of evil that we need to weed out of our, governing system. And, in America today, we're probably better off than most nations, but we still have a lot of evil that we need to get out. And in 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad company corrupts good morals. And we're going to touch more on this topic about who we hang out with, who we surround ourselves, affects you as a Christian. So we'll touch more on that later. So he tells us how, now he tells us how we can positively affect those in power. He kind of showed what we need to do on their part. They need to stay away from wicked people, and that's what they can do. But he's telling us now in verses 6 through 7 how we ourselves can have a positive impact on those in power. So 6 through 7, could someone read that for me? All right, so you're good. So we need to have humility and patience when dealing with those in power. When dealing with anyone, but especially when dealing with people in power, we need to know our place. We are not the one who has the power that they have. We need to know our place. And it kind of made me think of when it said, for it is better to be told, come here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. It's kind of like you rather have a raise than a demotion. That would really, in my opinion, hurt my ego if I was to be told to move back or, go. If I lifted myself up to a higher presence than what someone actually saw me and they had to tell me, all right, no, step back, that's not your place. So we obviously would rather have that raise than a demotion. And being arrogant and aggressive has never gotten anywhere far in life in the end. It makes me think of my wife. She's a para out of school, and so she deals with middle school kids all the time, and she gets so frustrated with the arrogant kids. They're loud, and they're obnoxious, and maybe they say inappropriate things, and, they may get a few laughs from the teacher every now and then or get laughs from the students, but the teacher especially does not appreciate that student. He appreciates the one who is quiet and does their homework and listens. Those are the people that they want as their students and who they appreciate. Something else that makes me think of is the person who's always trying to sell you on something that they're doing. There's people out there who, are always trying to inform you. And not when it's spiritual things. Obviously we need to listen when it has to do something with, spiritual things. But it's maybe how you eat or how you exercise. And they think their way is the best way. And every time you're with them, they are just trying to talk about it. And they are trying to sell you on it. And frankly, that annoys me so much whenever I have an opportunity to talk to someone or need to talk to someone who maybe it's with that food or maybe something healthy or how I'm exercising. I will specifically not go to that person because they are so arrogant about everything, and they're always trying to essentially kind of bully you into doing what they're doing. You're going to go to the person who you see has those attributes and is doing those things, is living that lifestyle, but isn't talking about themselves 24/7. Those are the ones that you kind of want to copy and emulate. Yes.
Well, true wisdom comes with humility because you realize that you're not the smartest person in every room, and you certainly don't have to prove it to everybody that you are. Mm-hmm. And people that think they're the smartest person in the room are not ever the smartest person.
I think I actually have that in my notes that my dad always told me. There's always someone who is smarter than you in the room. You can always learn something from someone else. So, don't always think that you have all the wisdom in the world. Yes.
I think when we think about affecting change, it's probably a little different
Was there, Tyler?
Kind of going off what Scott said, I think, I don't know how often this happens, but in correlation with the examples that you were giving about people that are always trying to sell you on something, usually someone that has true wisdom will never admit that they have wisdom. I mean, it would be very difficult for them to even say it because they know that that's an unwise thing to say. It's going to tarnish any advice that you want to give. So it can be a tell sign of the advice that you're getting or trying to find in someone if they are openly and often professing the wisdom and knowledge that they have about something, because that's not something that a wise person would do. They live a life that people who are seeking wisdom will see the decisions that are made, kind of like what you said, and that is what is attractive to them. They see the actions they do, and they try to glean from that, and they go and ask that person. And with humility, they tell them, hey, this is how I've done it. I made these mistakes, and I've learned from them, and you try to, learn from that. But it even takes wisdom from the part of the individual seeking wisdom. And I know we've talked about this throughout the whole classes. That in itself is a wise decision to try to find someone wiser than you.
No, I think that's a good point. You can kind of see where people are by who they ask for help from. No, that's a really good point. Did anyone else have their hand raised? Thank you for those comments. Those were great. So we obviously see, it is better to have a meek and humble spirit. You can do more good with that than being loud and boastful. To DJ's point, a lot of people, in this world, basically, I don't want to say everyone because that probably wouldn't be true, but you look at people who are on TV and the people who are making tons of money and the people who are just so popular, none of them are living godly lives to God's standards of what a Christian is. Some of them may, proclaim to be a Christian and talk about God every now and then, but none of them are living to the standards that He truly has. And we may think when we see all these people, oh, well, it worked out for this guy, or oh, it worked out for this girl, like they've gotten really successful in this business by fudging a few numbers, or by lying about this, or by being the loudest person in the room, or bullying people into doing things for them. It may work out for them, but everything comes to light in the end. And in God's eyes, that is never wise, and they are never actually successful. All right. Anything else? All right. Verses 8 through 10. Could someone read that for me?
Do not go hastily to court, for what will you do in the end when your neighbor has put you to shame? Debate your case with your neighbor, and do not disclose the secret to another, lest he who hears it exposes your shame, and your reputation be ruined.
So obviously communication is key. You need to be going to the source of where you heard something. Especially, if it's something that concerns you and you either saw something or heard something, you need to talk to them about it. Obviously, you can seek wise counsel, and you need to be smart with who you talk to. If you're wondering how you should handle a situation, you need to make sure that you're confiding in someone who isn't going to spread that information out. But you really need to be going to the source of the problem instead of bringing things into the public when you maybe didn't know all the facts. It makes me kind of think of social media. I don't have social media, and I haven't for a couple years, but I remember, there'd be people who might see something posted. And that's the problem with, social media is kind of everything is public now. So it's like if you're going to post it, then you that's on you if people don't like what you posted. But people may see what you posted and not agree with it. And so it's going to take a lot of discernment. It's going to take a lot of wisdom to know how to handle something like that, to go and talk to that person and not just kind of be like, oh, talking around like, oh, did you see what this person posted or what this person is saying? Like, oh, that doesn't look good. It's like, if you have a problem with it, then you should probably, you need to be talking to them about it. And you need to use that discernment, or like discernment of, is this sinful, what I saw? Is this sinful, what they're doing? Or is this just a matter of opinion and I don't agree with it? And that's where that wisdom and discernment comes from, of knowing between, is it worth confronting them, and how am I going to confront them? Or is it something that, isn't going to affect, isn't sinful? So there has to be, some self-control, because self-control behind it, because there are just some people who cannot keep things to themselves. It's one of those things that if you tell them a secret, you might as well just guarantee that it's going to be told, because they cannot keep it in. I laugh because my dad, he tends to, if you tell him, hey, this is happening, it's a surprise, don't tell him. We've kind of learned, like, we probably should not tell him, not because he can't keep it in, but because he truly does not remember it's a secret. And it's kind of like, oh, you got to know who you're talking to. You got to know, okay, I can't tell this person because they're going to go off and tell people. It's not because he has a big mouth, but it's because he truly forgets. So that's one thing we.
It's not because I have a big mouth?
It's not because you have a big
Okay.
mouth. It's not because you have a big mouth. It's because he truly does just not remember. At least that's what he's telling us.
No.
Yes.
I heard last night on a show that said the only way to keep a secret between two people is if one of them dies.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. We'll kind of get into that later. Not the death part, but keeping secrets.
I think it all boils down to humility, like you're talking about before. The reason people get themselves into trouble like this is because they're so arrogant. They don't have a sense of shame. There's no way I could be wrong about this. And this idea, that I'm sure we've all known people like this, that I can read people. I mean, I just need a few minutes with a person, I can figure them out. It's so arrogant, and it cuts, against what the Bible actually expresses about the heart and knowing the heart, like verse 3, as the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the heart of kings is unsearchable. You don't know a person's heart. You can't read them. And so it may seem absolutely obvious, unmistakable, but there's absolutely nothing that could go wrong with checking on it with that person. And at the very least, maybe they didn't realize what they were doing, and they can correct it. There's some wisdom in that. I think that there are situations like with Galatians 2 and Paul and Peter, where he withstood them to the face, where so many people are being led astray by it, and what he said or is doing is objectively wrong, and there's no way around it.
Yeah.
But, you can't just think of your own opinions or assumptions and ability to read a person or a situation is flawless, because then you're not thinking about the possibility that I could be filled with shame in this. People could really see how stupid I am, and then you're going to, shoot yourself in the foot. And so if you're humble, you're going to have a sense of self-preservation and awareness, and you're not going to just assume that I'm going to be right no matter what. And that's going to not just protect you, but protect that person's reputation and everyone else around us. And it's just wise to keep your mouth shut and not assume you're right all the time.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's something that reading through Proverbs, a common theme is, holding your tongue. You can do so much damage. If you hold your tongue, whether you are a fool or not, at least people will not know you're a fool. It's one of those things. Did you have your hand raised?
Those are along the same lines, because when this does happen, our goal should be to make it right, to resolve the issue, and if our motives aren't that, we're going to go talk to, if our motives are that, we are going to go talk to that person, and whether we get proven wrong or right, it'll at least be fixed,
Exactly.
Joe, his friends came to him and made the assumption that, hey, you must be a real sinner because of all this calamity that's happened to you. They never bothered to investigate knowing what was the situation. They just made the assumption, and instead of trying to make him feel better and comfort him, they were really causing a lot more pain and anguish in that aspect. So sometimes you need to investigate before you start talking about things.
Exactly, and that investigation, that's why it's so important to have relationships with your brethren. You know, if you have never spoken to someone in the congregation, one of your brothers or sisters in Christ, and the first time that you make that interaction is when you're telling them you think they're wrong, that's probably not the best impression. Whether what they did was wrong or not, they will stand, they will answer to God for that. But you got to make sure that you're doing it. You're building that relationship and you're investigating and kind of really know what's going on. The best way to know what's going on is when you know someone personally. I know in my family, I know when something's going on because I'm around them a lot, because I know their personalities well, because I ask them how they're doing or they tell me how they're doing. So I typically know the story behind things. I know what's actually going on, the reason why they're acting a certain way. But it shouldn't be any different with your brothers and sisters in Christ. If you have a question, you should do that. You should be investigating and figuring out, maybe why they did what they did, or understand it a little better and get to know them personally. Did anyone?
Wisdom on communication is not just the words you speak, but the words you hear and listen to. Listening is half of communication. And you don't have to go, if you don't hear the answer you want, you don't ask the question 14 different ways trying to get the answer you want.
Mm-hmm.
Quit asking after a while.
Exactly. Someone else up there? Yes.
Well, when you were talking about secrets or someone confiding in you perhaps something, it's more than not telling it. Because when you think about it, what if that person has repented of that? Then the person you tell it to, they don't know, and they can just go think bad or start talking about it to someone else. It's important that you keep it right there in your heart and not go tell it.
That's a really good point. You kind of have to see your motives behind it. If someone has repented, came forward, and they've realized they're in sin and they have fixed it, then why else do we need to be talking about it unless that we're seeing signs of that coming up again? We don't, especially to someone who maybe did not know that was going on. They maybe came into the church later on, and they don't need to know that. You need to figure out where your motives are, and are you just trying to spread gossip? Maybe you still have ill feelings towards that person, and you're kind of wanting more people to feel that way also. But you definitely, like you said, need to keep that. If it's not going to benefit anyone or benefit that person and it's not to help them, then we definitely need to keep that stuff in.
When you were talking about, knowing your brethren and the relationships you build, I think I agree with you completely that it is essential it's very important for, us to know each other. I don't think that it's demanded for correction to be made. I do think that it's very helpful because, like you said, when sin is pointed out, it's upon that person whether they make it right or not. It doesn't matter what excuse, you've never talked to me before or whatever, that's on them. But I think the danger that can come with that is, what you have to be careful is that I can't correct anyone until I have a strong personal relationship with them. And that's very objective. What's considered strong? How do you have to hang out with them multiple times and then you develop that? Because there's a mindset that I think is, especially in the world, that if you don't show them love before correction, as if correction is not love, if you don't show them some type of relationship before correction is made, then you're wrong. And I don't think that's what the Bible teaches. I mean, half the times that we see Paul and Peter preaching, he didn't know these people, and he told them that they had killed Christ or, did these things. So I do think that it's helpful. I think we all know that, but I don't think that it is essential for
probably the first words this gentleman ever told me, and maybe the only words. So, as Christians, like this lesson talks about, we have to get our lives right and be the flow of our lives to have effect on others.
Exactly. That is wisdom, knowing that, how can I help someone else if I am struggling with the same thing or struggling with something over here? That's wisdom. And so we've been talking a lot about self-control of, keeping your mouth shut when you know that what you're saying is not going to be beneficial, self-control of knowing when to say something, when you need to say something and how to say it. And that kind of ties us into the second half of chapter 25. That's self-control. Verse 16. To me, this verse is very funny, and I definitely feel attacked by it because I'm happy Hallie's not in here because I recently had to tell her, I'm like, you have to tell me to stop eating. Like, when I'm on my second or third plate, like, tell me to stop. And that it's not wise. Why would you eat so much and make yourself vomit afterwards? So too much of anything is not good. Too much food. Obviously we need food to survive, but we can overgorge ourselves and overeat to where, we make ourselves feel sick, especially if it's something sweet like honey. We can eat too much of it and it can end up making you feel sick or even throwing up. We need sleep, but, not too much of it because otherwise you'd be lazy. I know that for me, if I sleep past a certain point on the weekends, I end up getting a headache. You need sleep, but too much of that would not be beneficial for you. Even exercise. We need to be you need to exercise to be physically healthy. You need to be active. But if you exercise too much, then you're going to be neglecting your spiritual life. So too much of anything is not good. We need to make sure that we have that healthy balance and self-control as a Christian. And self-control is something that we need in life to be successful. You need to have self-control to be an elder. If you look at athletes, they have tremendous self-control in that sport, whether it's how they exercise, how they prepare, what they're eating. But then, those earthly athletes, they typically lack it a lot in other areas. Growing up, I was friends with a lot of wrestlers, and they are so disciplined when it comes to cutting weight, working out. They are so disciplined. But then, the worldly ones, they just had no self-control in anything else. It was like they put all their self-control in this sport and then just threw it out the window for how they live their life, how they treat people, who they pick as a partner and things like that. They just completely throw that out the window. So we see that with athletes a lot, is that they only have self-control in certain areas or for that specific sport. But us as Christians, we're supposed to have it in all areas of our life. In verse 28 of chapter 25, it says, "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." So God obviously sees this as a serious issue. If we don't have self-control, we can do a lot of damage. And we are obviously, if we don't have self-control, we aren't showing restraint to temptation, and we can end up hurting. You end up hurting yourself and a lot of people around you. So self-control is something that all Christians need to have, and something that, we're typically, I feel like, better at because we typically have that self-control in reading the Bible, and, we're living our life as God told us to, and we're not doing the things that we shouldn't. So self-control through the life as a Christian should be easier than those of the world, because we kind of see that self-control is completely lacking in the world right now. Everyone just, falls into whatever desire they're feeling, whether it's right or wrong. They just lean into it. And as Christians, we know that we can't do that. So self-control, is obviously affecting every aspect of our life. It definitely affects our friendships. It talks about it talks about, especially in our friendships, we want to make sure that we aren't being a burden to someone as a friend. But naturally, some people kind of are more of a burden than others. There are just those certain people who, when you are like, hey, you having a good day? And they're like, no. And you're like, well, I was just asking to be nice, But there are people who are just naturally more gloomy and, like to feel sorry for themselves. And those people are harder to be friends with. I've kind of learned, kind of like what my dad was saying earlier, people typically like to be friends with people who listen well. You want to be a good friend, then listen well, because people like to talk about their problems. And so you want to make friends and be a good friend, then you're going to have to listen, not the person who's always kind of dredging up their problems. So this kind of takes me back to verses 6 and 7 of 25 about not putting yourself forward, or he'll ask you, to step back. We don't want to be that person who's always kind of inserting ourselves into that person's life, or always kind of involving ourselves in what's going on. You kind of want to make sure that you have that self-control of knowing when you need to be there as a friend and when you need to step back. I remember what verse it was. It's verse 17. It was right under what I read. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. I thought that was pretty funny, just because, you wouldn't think of necessarily God caring about that, but it does matter. It matters that you're not being a burden to someone. It matters that you aren't overstaying your welcome and involving yourself in things that you shouldn't be. That's something kind of my parents always taught me. They were the type to tell me, never invite yourself over to someone's house, because you would have those friends who are just like, can I come over? And and you're like, I really don't want you to. And they would just invite themselves, or they'd go to your parents and be like, hey, Thomas asked if I could spend the night, and I'd be like, I didn't. I don't want them to. There's just those people who are kind of a burdensome, and we want to make sure that we're not doing that. And we also see people who almost hop around from friends to friends. And it's almost like people, and when they're friends with that certain group or this certain family, it's like they absorb them. And it's like that's all that they can hang out with. And we want to make sure we're not doing that either, that we're not hopping from friends to friends and only hanging out with these certain people, because that typically doesn't end well. And wow, we are. All right. I guess I said I'd rather not finish. So we need to be good friends, but we need to have boundaries. Verse 25 says, like cold water to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. Nothing's better than hearing great news from a friend, but we need to make sure that we have boundaries and, play it cool. And to be that good, or if you want that good friend, then you need to be that good friend as well. And so we need to use caution when we're picking our friends. Verses 18 through 19, it just lays it out there very plainly how it feels to be betrayed by someone, by a friend in particular. And we've all been there. We've all either maybe said something that we probably shouldn't have said, but we trusted it by telling someone we trusted to, and whether they went and told someone. So we've all kind of been betrayed by someone, and it never feels good. And so we need when you picking friends, you need to have that caution of looking at their track record almost, of like, all right, kind of how are they as a friend? How are they treating the people around them? How have they treated these people over here that they were friends with for years? Because we need to be surrounding ourselves with good influences. And so we need that self-control. We need that discipline over what we say. And so that kind of leads us into chapter 26. chapter 26. It says, honoring a fool makes no sense. It's like snow in the summer. And we need to make sure we're not instigating foolishness. We need to make sure, someone has said before, like, what movies are you watching? What music are you listening to? Are you supporting people who talk filthy and say horrible jokes? Are you laughing at that? And that kind of took me back because you don't think it, well, I personally didn't think of it that way. But when you're watching it and you are listening to their music, that type of music, you're supporting it. You are basically accepting it and dropping yourself down to their level. And so we see kind of how God views foolishness. He absolutely hates it. And then in verse 11, it says, like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly. So we need to be learning from our past mistakes. Like I said, reading these Proverbs, I've realized areas that I need to be working on. And I would be a fool if I did not work on those, if I continue to repeat that. I remember hearing one time that insanity or the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that blew my mind at the time. So that's essentially what that is. If you're going to continue to be foolish, you're basically returning to your own vomit. In verse 12, it says, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope of a fool than for him. So again, we need to be staying humble. Those who are vain, he's almost saying, they're almost so far gone. They are very far out there. And it's going to take a lot to get them back on the right path. Because you are never going to be, the smartest person in the room, like I was talking about earlier. So you need to stay humble and know that you always have room to learn. Then he talks about laziness in verses 13 through 16. Laziness is just one of my pet peeves. It has always drove me crazy when you see people just lying around when they're supposed to be working, or, at work you see people always hanging out in the bathroom because they don't want to be out there working. That is definitely something that drives me crazy. And then in verse 13, it kind of, I don't know, I thought this verse was kind of funny just because it says, the sluggard says, there's a line in the road, there's a line in the street, or there's lines in the streets. You wouldn't think of that as something someone would say today, but I'm assuming that's what people said back in the day. Maybe there were lions walking around a lot more than I realized, and they would say that so they didn't have to get out of bed. And so then, moving on to verse 17 and 19, it says, whoever meddles in a quarrelsome, not his own, is like one who takes a passing dog by the ears, like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I'm only joking. So obviously God thinks that this is very foolish, that getting yourself involved in other people's business, getting yourself involved in people's business and involving yourself in someone else's drama is not good, especially if you're not truly there to try to help. Well, I didn't get through it, but I'm happy. We didn't end early, so that's good. I appreciate everyone's comments.